The United Nations appeal for more troops and equipment for its peacekeeping mission in Mali is our top story. The UN force known as MINUSMA is trying to stabilize the north of the country and protect civilians from attacks by Islamist extremists. But less than half of the 12,600 strong force mandated by the UN Security Council is on the ground. Clementine Logan has more.
Sounding the alarm. With less than half of its mandated strength on the ground, UN Special Representative to Mali said recent attacks in the north of the country were an important wake-up call over security.
After a period of calm that facilitated the holding of the presidential elections and the cantonment of armed groups in Kidal, increasing tensions and acts of provocations resulted in clashes throughout the months of September in various localities in the north.
Kunduz told the UN Security Council that more helicopters and troops were needed to replace a French force that intervened this year to halt an Islamist takeover. France still has 3,200 soldiers on the ground aiding UN peacekeepers, but plans to reduce that number by about a third.
The drawdown of the French forces is conducted at the tempo that we had announced. We are keeping some soldiers maybe a bit more for supporting the general elections, but I think that the beginning of next year we will have in Mali as a Serval force around 1,000 soldiers.
The UN mission was also dealt a blow by the withdrawal of Nigerian and Chadian troops in August. A report by UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said that to reach its authorized strength, MINUSMA needs 2 infantry battalions, an airfield engineer company, an information operations unit, and a special forces company. A suicide bomb attack in Timbuktu on the 28th of September and shells fired into Gao on October 7th all signal increasing tensions in the north. This has prompted calls for increased security vigilance around legislative polls scheduled for the 24th of November. A reminder that the fight against terrorism in Mali isn't over yet. Clementine Logan, CCTV.
Apart from the situation in Mali, the African Union and the UN Security Council are also concerned of events in the Central African Republic. Following the March 24th coup, where Seleka rebels toppled Francois Bozizé and the leader Michel Djotodia took over, the international community has been alarmed by intensifying violence in the country. So far, the NGO Médecins Sans Frontières has reported that more than 400,000 people have been displaced due to the conflict. There are also fears that the conflict might spill to CAR's neighbors. Last week on Thursday, the UN Security Council unanimously approved a resolution strengthening the United Nations Peace-Building Office in the country. It also supported calls for the deployment of a multinational African Union force. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and the African Union are in a month's time required to present a report before the Security Council with details on the establishment of the African-led force, which would potentially be transformed into a UN peacekeeping mission. France is also set to increase its 400 troops currently stationed in the capital Bangui, there in CAR. Well, earlier we spoke to the head of the Doctors Without Borders mission in the Central African Republic, Ellen van der Velden, and she told us what the humanitarian situation was like on the ground for those who fled the violence.
Many people in large parts of the country have fled their homes and are hiding in the bushes and fields where they normally work, where they have made a small shelter where they're living. Many people fall ill with malaria because they're so exposed, because they don't live at home but in the fields, and they drink very bad water, so we see them having things like diarrhea. And especially in Bosangoa, that is one place where 28,000 people are packed together in an area as big as 9 football fields, which means that they're all on top of each other. There's hardly any space to even lie down. And with so many people, the hygienic circumstances are very challenging to maintain. So we are digging latrines and creating hand washing points, and we are treating the people for whatever disease they may have. The needs are much bigger than what these organizations together can offer. And so, for example, our organization, MSF, we have 11 health projects, but many other organizations do not have that many active projects on the ground. So we're urging all organizations to try and open more projects.
conflict in Somalia is another situation posing a challenge to both the African Union and the UN Security Council. The challenge involves stamping out the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab, who not only stand in the way of restoring peace and stability in Somalia, but have also proved to be a threat to regional peace and security. This was seen in the 2010 Kampala terror attack and the recent attack on the Westgate Mall here in Nairobi. Currently, the AU, through the African Union mission in Somalia, has a little over 17,000 troops supporting Somali government forces to fight the Al-Shabaab. This force comprises 5,000 troops from Kenya, 5,700 from Uganda and 4,400 from Burundi. Ethiopia has also deployed soldiers, but they are not under AMISOM command. The AU is pushing for a military surge to help crush Al-Shabaab. AU wants over 6,000 soldiers and police to boost the AMISOM peacekeeping force to about 24,000 troops. Well, for more on our top story, I'm now joined by Stephen Fee in New York, Joaf Toka of the American Graduate School of International Affairs and Diplomacy is live in Paris, and Mohamed Hirmoge live from the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Thank you all for joining us. And Stephen, let me begin with you. We've seen this apparent shortfall of equipment and boots on the ground in Mali. Does the UN have the capacity to play a leading role in resolving conflicts across Africa?
Well, it's a great question, and as your reporter lined up there for you, there's a real issue here that the UN force is really at just about half capacity. They're hoping to gear up to about 11,200 troops. Right now, they're just around half that number of blue helmets on the ground in Mali. And of course, Bert Konder's the head of that force, saying that troop generation needs to speed up. But as you well know, the United Nations relies on member states to contribute troops. And with Chadian forces pulling back, Nigerian forces pulling back, there's a real question here about whether or not the United Nations can get boots on the ground. The other point that you brought up is there's a logistics issue here. UN peacekeepers need to have access, in particular, to the northern regions of Mali. There's many airfields that need engineers on the ground to help repair equipment, repair airstrips. So there's a lot of issues here. And of course, as Bert Konder's pointed out, a string of recent terror attacks have been what he called a wake-up call to the United Nations to continue supporting the political institutions that it's been supporting in Mali. Recently, of course, the successful presidential elections, they said, were a huge boon for the country's progress. But it's still slow going for this force, and it's a real question about whether or not they'll be able to get up to the capacity that the Security Council's really authorized here.
Right, Joaf, so let me cross over to you there in Paris, and France is pushing for interventions in Mali and now in the CAR. Would it be willing to take a leading role as it did in Mali at the start of this year?
Well, to some extent, one could say that de facto France is already playing a major role, the major role perhaps in terms of the international community. It may be locally perceived differently. But on the other hand, there is a consequent difference between the situation in Mali last year, which saw French mobilization in order to stop a so-called terrorist Muslim radical initiative and offensive in northern Mali, which may endanger the entire entity of the state of Mali. Now, the situation in the Central African Republic is of a completely different nature. We're speaking about an international effort, and mainly a French one, to stabilize a weak, fragile, decentralized state, which is the reason for some trouble. So to some extent there are similarities, although the nature, the profound nature of the operation on the terrain is different.
Mohamed, let me come to you there in Mogadishu. The African Union is pushing for a surge in Somalia. Just how serious is the need for a boost in the number of AMISOM troops?
In fact, Panina, the need to boost the number of AMISOM troops in Somalia has never been more serious and necessary than it is at the moment. And indeed, there is a consensus regarding that right here, considering how aggressive Al-Shabaab has become over the last couple of months, from the June 19 attack on the NDP compound to the pullout of the Doctors Without Borders entirely from the whole of Somalia, to the recent September 21 Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi that lasted almost 80 hours. Besides, the internationally recognized federal government of Somalia only controls only a fraction of the country. One other factor that actually necessitates a boost in the number of AMISOM troops is the fact that there is need to have aid access in South and Central Somalia, areas that are considered to be Al-Shabaab's stronghold.
But, Stephen, the UN is currently running several peace missions here in Africa and supporting some African Union-led missions. Is there confidence in New York that such missions are the way to go in resolving conflicts in the continent?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think the real answer is people just aren't sure right now. Obviously, the Security Council has been bringing up the issue of Central African Republic, as your guest was discussing. Currently, the UN has a peace-building office there now, but the next step could very well be a full-on peacekeeping operation. Now, MINUSMA, of course, is the UN's largest peacekeeping operation. The one interesting thing here that you might see coming out of the Security Council is a bit of a renewed focus on the region, in particular with Nigeria and Chad joining the Security Council beginning January 1. They were just elected as non-permanent members today. They'll be on the rotating 15-member body for at least the next 2 years. And what that could do is it could draw new attention to conflicts in Africa. In particular, Nigeria has a vested interest in the Sahel and also has, of course, regional interests in CAR in particular as well. So you might see a little bit more of a focus of this here at the Security Council. But, of course, there's a lot of wariness about intervening in a way that the UN sees as counter to its eventual mission of having smaller peacekeeping missions, what they call a lighter footprint in places like this. So while they're very much trying to stay apprised of the situation, they're not sure how to proceed necessarily.
Joab, as you mentioned, obviously France, they're playing the role, like you said, in stabilizing these troubled West African countries. So is there sufficient support in France for its government's continued involvement, including deployment of troops in efforts to resolve conflicts in its former colonies?
Yes, there is a sufficient and even more than sufficient support of French public opinion regarding what is happening in terms of French intervention in Mali, in Central African Republic, and the overall approach, the overall standing, I would say, of French diplomacy and French military in the eastern central part of the continent. I would even say, I would go further and say that amongst a series of domains about which the public opinion does not support in great figures, in convincing dimensions, the policies of President Hollande and his administration. This is perhaps the domain, if not the only domain, Africa, policies in Africa, in which the public opinions do support Hollande's position. Now, one can never be sure that these things may be maintained with the rush of events, but as long as there are no significant number of casualties, and there is coherence in terms of what France is doing in terms precisely of its leading role in the Western world, then I believe that public opinion would stay of great support to President Hollande in this sense.
Well, Mohammed, you did mention there that there is an urgent need for the AMISOM force there in Somalia to be boosted, but we also know the AU has previously experienced challenges in getting member states to deploy pledged troops. So is there confidence now that African countries are ready and able to provide the additional 6,000 troops at once for AMISOM?
Well, indeed, there's confidence right now that AMISOM troops contributing countries might offer more soldiers, given that the threat is now regional and not peculiar to only Somalia. We've seen attacks in Kampala, Nairobi, and Addis Ababa, and those are the countries that have been providing AMISOM numbers, and therefore the threat level has now increased. Therefore, there is that confidence that indeed other African countries might as well jump in and join the African Union bandwagon. That is the mission, AMISOM mission over here. And there is that exceeding confidence indeed that there is need for concerted efforts in the fight against Al-Shabaab, now that even the United Nations has declared fresh war on Al-Shabaab. So what we expect is not only the approval by the United Nations Security Council of the extra 6,000 troops, but also heed calls that indeed the forces here need to be boosted in terms of military facilities like fighter jets and helicopters.
All right, Termoget there joining us live from Mogadishu. We have Joab Turka live from Paris and Stephen Fee in New York. Thank you all for joining us. It's been one very interesting discussion. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour coming up. Terror alert. Uganda government warned of planned Westgate-style attack in Kampala. and tourists' paradise, the wonder that is Senegal's Pink Lake.
This week, Talk Africa is in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, following the developments of Africa's relationship with the International Criminal Court.
This is a billion-euro industry.
What is at stake for Africa?
Sitting heads of state have immunity.
We need a defer.
What is at stake for the ICC?
The ICC itself is actually unaccountable.
Why is it that ICC is only focused on certain countries in Africa?
So what exactly is that relationship between Africa and the ICC?
Fresh security worries have emerged in Uganda's capital city, Kampala. The American embassy there has warned there could be an attack similar to that on a Kenyan shopping mall. CCTV's Isabel Nakiria has more details.
The U.S. mission in Kampala says it continues to assess reports that Kampala faces a terror strike similar to Westgate. It's been almost a month since gunmen stormed the Kenyan mall, an attack that killed at least 67 people, and the region's been bracing for more. The American embassy says it does not have details of when or where there might be an attack, but that Americans in the city should avoid public venues and large crowds. Ugandan police force say they are responding to the U.S. warning.
Places where people gather in large numbers, we have taken over the security of those places. You know, they used to have private guards, but now it is the police that has taken over the security of those places. And we are urging the public not to panic, because we are here to protect them. We have deployed our people in places of worship where people gather many, places of entertainment where people go for concerts, shopping malls.
Somali militants Al-Shabaab claim responsibility for the Westgate. It says the attack is in retaliation for the presence of Kenyan soldiers in Somalia. Uganda also has thousands of troops in Somali territory. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
South African police are offering a $10,000 reward for the capture of a suspected child killer. The mutilated bodies of 2 young children were found in a township outside Johannesburg on Tuesday, a discovery that's left the community shocked and demanding answers. CCTV's Guy Henderson reports.
Paying their respects to a family in mourning. Throughout the day, hundreds poured through this tiny shack. Politicians on the campaign trail.
It cannot be that 20 years down the line, a life of a black child still continues to be so cheap.
And local friends, mothers, fathers, asked what they'd do if they found the man thought to be responsible. We would kill him, they tell me. And in Deep Sloot, that's more than a threat. Mob justice can rule here. On Tuesday, parents came out in violent protest, a rampage to the prime suspect's home. It was empty.
It's horrific. Something has gone horribly wrong.
The visiting Minister of Women and Children is urging calm. These tensions also have a xenophobic undertone.
But we're also calling on our community to support the efforts of the police to come forward with evidence. Anyone that has seen or that knows where the suspect is, please come back, come to the police with the evidence.
But many residents here say they don't trust the police. Here now, but otherwise accused of neglect. These are the communal toilets where both of the victims' bodies were found. They'd been mutilated, and there are signs also that they'd been raped. Just a month before, and only 100 metres down the road, the body of another 5-year-old girl was found, but no arrests were made. Investigators are now linking the two, making this a manhunt for a suspected serial killer who lived yards from both crime scenes. He may know better than to return here, but somewhere amongst South Africa's almost endless townships, a murderer roams free. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Deep Sloot.
For years, young boys and girls have been trafficked into Gabon from all over West Africa to be exploited as child laborers. But there are signs the government is starting to crack down on the practice. Together with UNICEF, Gabonese authorities have launched a training program for police and social workers to tackle the problem. Susan Mungeli reports.
This teenager from Togo started working as a maid at the age of 12 for a family in Libreville, the capital of Gabon. After 5 years, she managed to escape and was taken in by a center for exploited children.
I was doing everything. I often worked from 6 to 11 or 10 p.m. Then we'll go to bed and get up at 3 or 4 and work until 11 p.m. Every day, things were the same.
In the last 10 years, about 700 children have been rescued from exploitation in Gabon, but thousands more remain in virtual slavery. They come from Benin, Togo and Nigeria, ending up in one of Africa's most affluent oil-producing countries.
These children are exploited by West Africans who go looking for them, who go to their country of origin and remove them from their families by offering sums of money. They talk about fostering, but when the children arrive in Gabon, they are sent out to work. So children as young as 5 or 6, we find these children working in garages in West Africa. And these children can work there for as long as 15 years.
At the Montbourg market, the largest in Libreville, dozens of children work as traders and porters from dawn until dusk. Many of them arrived in Gabon on overcrowded boats and endured perilous journeys organized by child trafficking networks. Some of the children don't even reach their intended destination alive.
We traveled for 5 days on the water before arriving in Gabon. Just as we got there, our boat capsized and everyone fell in the sea. We were about 280, but only 80 of us managed to get out. Thanks to God, I was able to survive.
Children often aren't paid and frequently have their passports confiscated to stop them from running away.
There was someone who helped me and brought me to the woman who had asked that I come to her home. I stayed with her. I did all her housework. I washed the dishes by myself. I was doing everything by myself. She was hardly at home.
Now, the Gabon government and UNICEF have launched a nationwide training program for lawyers, police and social workers to try to combat child trafficking. But the United Nations says more needs to be done beyond Gabon's borders, calling for greater coordination with its children's countries of origin to prevent them from being thrown into a life of misery and servitude. Susan Mungeli, CCTV.
Let's take another break here on Africa Live. When we come back, tourists' paradise, the wonder that is Senegal's Pink Lake. Senegal is probably best known for having one of Africa's most successful football teams. What most people don't realize is that Senegal, seated on the western coast of Africa, is a tourist paradise. The country has stunning beaches and national parks. It is also home to Lake Redba, famous for its bright pink color. For the locals, however, it's what's beneath the water that is far more enticing. CCTV's Desiree Cannon has that story.
The colors caused by algae that's attracted to salt. That same salt also attracts thousands of workers eager to pull it from the lake for sale across West Africa. 49-year-old Mata Diop is one of the senior diggers here, working 6 hours to 7 hours a day. And it's hard going. First, he loosens the salt with a stick and then dives in to collect it.
I have been collecting salt at Lac Rose for 23 years now. With the money I've earned, I have been able to build the small house you can see here. I also take care of my family and send my children to school.
Mechanical extraction here is banned to preserve the environment, so everything is done by hand. There's a clear division of labor. The men go in the water, the women ferry the salt back and then unload it. For many workers here, this job is a short-term activity to earn money to migrate to other West African countries to set up a business and even to Europe. Many others simply return to their villages when the rainy season comes. But while it lasts, this is steady, if demanding, work, and a tradition that dates back years. Desiree Cannon, CCTV, Pink Lake, Senegal.
There is a growing trend of Chinese TV shows in Africa since the first Chinese TV soap operas produced in Kiswahili debuted in the continent in 2011. The shows have become very popular in various countries, and the trend is likely to continue with the introduction of 2 more shows to be aired in Tanzania.
The art of television connects 2 peoples half a world apart. The hit TV shows Father's Wishes and Mother's Glorious Days reflect family life in today's urban China. They will be aired starting this November during prime time by the Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation through its TV channel TBC1.
I believe the Tanzanian people will learn more about modern China through the TV series. They will better understand the developments of China in recent years, as well as the lives of Chinese people. It will deepen the friendship between the 2 countries.
The first Chinese soap opera to air in Africa is called Mao Dodo and Her Sweet Days. This 36-episode light comedy is about a modern Chinese couple and their relationships with each other's families. It was dubbed in Swahili and broadcast in various countries in 2011 and has since become a smash hit. That success has encouraged both countries to cooperate further.
Well, the future cooperation is to continue, and I'm also involving people from professionals from the 2 sides, and even to instead of producing the series in China, we could look into how we can do the production in Tanzania, just to change the sceneries from China to Tanzania.
More TV series and movies will be dubbed in English, French, Arabic, Portuguese, and Swahili for broadcast in Africa later this year. CCTV.
Quite entertaining there. Everyone in the control room is quite
they're laughing, right? But the fact is there's a market for that kind of content. Localizing it in languages for different markets simply makes good business sense.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe perhaps we need to have some African shows now in Chinese and perhaps then have them broadcast there.
Of course. Right, here's what's coming up on Biz Africa tonight.